Hi, and welcome to Section 4 of the program. In the next section of the program, I'm going to be teaching you the pathway or the steps of dialogue. But first, I want to stress the importance of starting with yourself. Albert Einstein once said that the problems of the world cannot be solved by the same type of thinking that created them. I think about that. It's a powerful statement. Success in dialogue is not just learning a new process of communicating, but it requires a shift in how you think and understand what's happening. And that's really what this lecture is all about. I want to introduce you to a model. I call it the Collusion Model, in order to deepen your understanding of conflict and your responsibility in that process. Think of a relationship as a circle. We don't act independently, but each person reacts to the actions and cues from the other. Person A acts, person B reacts, which triggers a reaction in A, which triggers a new reaction in B, and so on. Here's a more detailed look at what's happening. In fact, here's a definition of conflict that I want to give you. Think about conflict as a circular and mutually reinforcing negative interaction. If you're person A, you see the behavior of person B and form perceptions or thoughts, judgments about its meaning. Those thoughts create your feelings, and those feelings and interpretations determine your behavior. Person B does the same. He or she sees person A's behavior and puts an interpretation, a spin on it. And that interpretation results in person B's feelings and then determines their behavior. The important part of the cycle is to see that you're not really responding to the behavior of the other person, but to your interpretation of their behavior, to the meaning that you put on their behavior. So often, the meaning that we put on the behavior of other people is based on misunderstanding of their deeper intent and feelings or needs. This sets up a collusive and escalating cycle. Let me give you an example. A father doesn't trust his teenage son, and so he takes away some privileges. The son perceives his father as controlling, and so asserts his independence even more, which increases the father's tendency to not trust him and therefore take away even more privileges. They each have a very different interpretation of what's happening. The son thinks the father is controlling, whereas the father thinks he's teaching responsibility. The father thinks the son is rebellious, whereas the son thinks he's expressing his individuality and independence. Both gather evidence to prove themselves right and the other wrong, and the cycle just escalates. Here's another example. A manager is very involved in her department's day-to-day business. The staff, sensing a lack of confidence in their decision-making, defer to the manager, which she uses as evidence that the staff doesn't take enough initiative, and so she continues to be involved. The staff, on the other hand, use the manager's behavior, involvement, as a cue to continue to defer and please her rather than manage the business using their own authority. Each person uses the behavior of the other as a cue for their own behavior. Each thinks of their own behavior as a response and thereby caused by the behavior of the other. Each perceives his or her own intent as very different from the spin the other puts on it. Notice that what each of them does to solve the problem as they perceive it only aggravates the problem and elicits the very behavior from the other that they don't want. Neither sees his own part in what's happening. E.F. Schumacher, in his book, A Guide for the Perplexed, says, "We tend to see ourselves in light of our intentions, which are invisible to others, while we see others mainly in light of their actions, which are visible to us. We have a situation in which misunderstanding and injustice are the order of the day." Unquote. We get into conflicts all the time because we have an incomplete understanding of the intent and meaning of the behavior of other people, which sets up a number of negative dynamics. First, each person builds a case to prove himself or herself right about his or her point of view, which also makes other people wrong. We perceive that our own motives are noble and innocent while accusing other people of bad intent. Each person is aware of his own intent rather than the consequences of his behavior. We focus on our intent rather than consequences. Each person believes that the other person is the one that needs to change in order to solve the problem. And so all of our efforts go into persuading, convincing, even manipulating other people to try to get them to be different, thinking that somehow this will resolve the problem. The response that's triggered by each person results in the opposite of their desired behavior. The son becomes more rebellious. The father becomes more controlling. So to resolve conflict, you have to break out of this collusive cycle. You begin to do so as you recognize that there are really two very different stories going on. Person A has a story and person B has a story. And it's not, in fact, a matter of one being right and the other being wrong. In fact, if you believe that one story is right and the other is wrong, you shut down communication, you begin distorting evidence to support your own point of view, and you move quickly towards polarization. Rather than seeking who is right and who is wrong and blaming the other party for the conflict, you have to develop a curiosity to understand the other person's story. This is the alternative to dominating, accommodating, and avoiding. Mediators talk about the third story. They're trying to construct a story that's balanced and incorporates the point of view of both parties, a view that does not make one party right and the other party wrong. We want to learn to do this when in the middle of conflict. Dialogue is the process by which we break the pattern of collusion. But before you're able to engage in productive dialogue, you have to challenge and change your own paradigm and unhelpful patterns of collusion. Let's see how to do that in the next lecture.